Hello again and happy holidays to everyone. Mark here again. In my last post I said that I was going to start with our full swing during our next video, and I have since decided to save that for next year. So 2019 in 2 weeks we're going to start from the beginning with our setup and focus primarily moving forward on our full swing, and again make sure we're ready to hit the ground running come spring. So I'm going to take advantage of this last video of 2018 and button up a couple of ideas for our short game, focusing primarily on our pitching, which we touched on last time. We're going to make sure our setup is good and sound so that we don't have any issues there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sole of the club and how a minor adjustment to our club head at address can give us a little bit more cushion and room for error with the shot. And then finally, I'm going to give you 2 points of reference to let us know if we're doing things correctly, both in the motion of our body and in our finish position. So starting with our setup, looking first at our posture, I realized after the fact that I neglected to talk about this with our chipping and pitching. So if you go back to our putting lesson, I was telling you that because our shoulders rotate perpendicular to our spine, we need to make sure that we tilt or pivot at our hips to be able to aim that rotation towards the ground to help meet the golf ball that, well, is sitting on the ground. In doing this, what we want to avoid is sitting down with our knees. As you do that, typically our spine is too vertical, and again, our shoulders now are more likely to want to rotate around us. So then getting to the ground becomes a much more difficult task. So we're tilting. It's going to help us to then get the club to meet the ball on the ground. We're going to do this with our full swing as well. So virtually every shot we hit, unless we have a golf ball above our feet, we're going to be in a tilted over position. We're going to do so at our hips, not our back, okay? Not our knees. Secondly, grip. Because pitching to me again is a mini version of a full swing, we're going to hang on to the club as if it was a full swing grip. And what differentiates our putting, and for some of you, I think chipping is sort of a transitional area. Again, because chipping is a little bit more like putting, you can chip with your full swing grip, but you can also chip with your putting grip. But certainly with our pitching, to be able to access our hinge properly, we want to hang on to it in our fingers. And I think the easiest way to visualize this is to pick up a suitcase, or in this case a basket, something with a handle, and our fingers are designed to create little hooks so that we can hang on to stuff easier. So same thing, we want to hang on to the grip, also known as a handle, in our fingers. Same thing with our trail hand. And again, this is just going to make it easier to access and react to the weight of the club and begin to create this hinge when it's in our fingers, okay? So just keeping that nice and simple. So we have tilt at the hips, hanging onto the club in our fingers. Now we want to talk about the club itself. So all of our wedges, generally speaking, they have a wider bottom than the rest of our irons, and they also have more of a curve to it. It's actually more of an angle, but if you were to look at it, it looks more curved. And we refer to that curvature as the bounce. And if we're using our club correctly, we're going to be hitting or making contact with the ground more in the middle to the back of that bounce, okay, or that curve. What we want to do is avoid hitting the ground with the leading edge. And when I first was learning the game, I was instructed to lean my hands way forward, play the golf ball back in my stance, but what this did is it exposed the leading edge, the very sharp corner where the grooves meet the sole, and a lot of times that led to a chunk or a dig. So if you took your club on your finger here, resting the sole on your finger, if you were to rotate the toe inward towards the target, you're going to feel less contact with your finger. It's going to move towards that leading edge, okay? That's that sharp edge. Now, if we rotate it the other direction, you're going to feel that contact point with your finger move away from where it was when we had the leading edge, and now you're actually going to be able to visually see the leading edge because of that curvature. As you rotate and expose more bounce, moving that contact point back, it lifts the leading edge off the ground. If we can lift the leading edge off the ground by rotating the club open slightly, that's going to give us a little bit more cushion or bounce, so when we hit the ground, it's going to ricochet off. okay? So we're going to be less likely to dig. In terms of our setup, again, we still have that lowercase letter y with the club right in front of our lead thigh. We're not outside of our body. So again, we're now in a spot with tilt in the hips, club in the fingers, slight rotation. We're going to call it 4 or 5 degrees. We're going to have that room for error. That's always nice to have that. When the face does open, the ball does have a tendency to move a little bit to the right, 6-8 inches. So you may find in your practice you need to move your alignment slightly left to offset that open club face, but it's worth it because of that cushion that we have. Finally, we're looking at how our body moves. And again, we're trying to avoid that hang back and help. And I have this little apparatus I built. So if you were to go to a place like, some of you may have this stuff in your garage, but if you were to go to a place like Lowe's or Home Depot, I've got a board here. It's 3 feet long, foot wide, and then I've got a piece of a swim noodle. Now, swim noodles are not very high in demand this time of year, so if you did, when you're at Lowe's getting the board, go back to the plumbing area, they're going to sell a similar foam pipe wrap that basically is an insulator, $2, cut it in half, and now we have this nice teeter-totter. So with our slightly narrower stance and leaning left, I've got the forward part of my teeter-totter on the ground. If I was to make a swing and try to hang back and get underneath it, you're going to see instant feedback. I always like instant feedback. So once we're here, we're going to be able to, again, make our swing and pivot, rotate off of that lead leg. The weight stayed on the front leg and it never moved back and forth. So as we make our backswing, rotate a little bit, make our follow through and rotate a little bit, I'm able to now pivot, and I've got this instant feedback in the motion. Okay, so that's important. Now we don't want to overdo it and lean so far forward, but I think you're going to know when you've gone too far the other direction. So we're able to pivot. So pivoting is the key here. When we're tilted over and our shoulders are rotating around that tilted over spine angle, when I pivot, rotate, and go into my finish, my club is actually, because of that tilt, once it leaves the ground, it's going to leave the ground upward to the left. So again, exposing the bounce of the club, hitting the ground and following through, the motion of my rotation takes the club around me. So again, the first point of reference would be the tilting back and forth on the teeter-totter. The second one is I want you to look at the back of your lead hand. What we want to see is right here, if I was to, again, make my swing and rotate, the back of my hand is now going to face to the left of the target, okay? What we don't want to see would be a lot of wrist hinge where now the back of my hand's facing the sky. Okay, that's an indicator of breakdown. The other thing we don't want to see is that the back of my hand is still facing the target. If we go back to our putting, when we would push through, if you remember the drill where we had the gloves underneath our arms, we don't want to push the club through. That will actually keep the club on the ground for too long. We may chunk it or blade it, or potentially because we're pushing the club actually out to the right of the target, we may hit it off of the hosel. Not good. So again, we're pivoting. We're seeing the back of our lead hand, in this case as a righty, to the left of the target. We reverse that as a lefty. And this is our point of reference number 2 we're looking for to see if we're doing it correctly. If I'm rotating, back of my hand should be that way. If I'm breaking down, we're going to see it pointing towards the sky or towards the target. Now, the last thing I would say, if we're doing this correctly, if you look at the space between the end of the club and my body, call that 6 or 8 inches. If I rotate properly, I should still see that 6 or 8 inches here. We don't want to see more, okay? Technically, we could get away with less, but a lot of times that's going to be because we have added some risks to it. And some of you may be really good at timing that, but we want to make sure that we're in a spot where we don't have to necessarily rely so much on timing. It's an athletic motion, there's timing in every athletic motion, but if we can avoid relying solely on timing, then our consistency based on the motion goes up. So again, tilt at the hips, hang on to the club in the fingers. We're going to rotate the club open slightly. We're going to make our swing where we rotate and pivot. We're going to see that I'm on my lead leg. My heel of my trail leg may be off of the ground, and the back of my hand is now facing way to the left as a righty of the target. All good signs of a good motion, okay? So hopefully this helps to just clean up a few ideas, some loose ends with our pitching, so that we've ended 2018 on a high note, and we'll be ready in 2 weeks to start taking some of these ideas and applying it to our full swing. Now, I know I always say, have fun, stay warm, and I'll see you next time. Quite frankly, it's pretty nice out right now, so you won't have to work too hard to stay warm. But still, work hard on these ideas, have fun, enjoy your New Year's, be safe, and I'll look forward to seeing you next year.